mushroom ravioli. I'm starting with some flour, a little bit of baking soda and salt. Stir those together, get this incorporated. Making a little basin in the middle of that, and I am putting water in, and I'm adding 2 tablespoons of olive oil. All of the ingredients will be in the description below. Just stir it up. We want this to be a soft dough. Now have some water handy because again, you could make this into a dough, but we want it nice and soft. Now it looks like some of that might not make it into this dough. I'm kneading it to form a soft ball. That looks pretty soft. Taking the extra flour out of my bowl, and now I will be putting this in the fridge just to chill about 2 hours. The dough does not actually have to chill, but it does need to rest, and you can do that on your countertop. But sometimes I put it in the fridge because I end up getting busy and finishing the project the next day. Pull out a few mushrooms to use for garnish later. Put your mushrooms in a food processor and process them until they're crumbly. Okay, the skillet is preheated. Saute the mushrooms. Midway through, we will add some seasoning. It may be hard to see. The mushrooms are cooking. You can see all the water. I'm now seasoning, so I'm using a little bit of lemon juice. I am putting in some other seasonings. I've got ground rosemary, sage, pepper, and some salt. Now you can see most of the liquid is gone. So at this point, I'm going to be adding nutritional yeast and almond flour. You can smell that nutritional yeast just really adds a nice aroma. Next, I am adding some soy milk, although you could use any plant-based milk. I'm going to cook this till it's thick. Cook this until all of the liquid is gone. You can see I'm pretty much getting almost a paste. I've transferred the mushroom filling to a bowl, and I'm going to put it in the refrigerator to chill. Okay, the dough has rested. I have it on a floured cutting board, and I've made it as square as I can. So I'm going to cut that in half. First, I will pat it out, and then I will roll it into a rectangle. I would like it to be about 4 inches wide. I cut my strip in half because I wasn't going to be able to get it as thin as I want. I'm looking to get this to be about 1/8 of an inch thick. Okay, it's almost 5 inches, and it's about 1/8 of an inch. I am now going to cut this in 2-inch widths. That'll help me control the size of my ravioli. Okay, I've got my strips, and I am putting about 1.5 teaspoons of filling. Now, as you can see, I'm going to shape it a little bit so that I have some edges to squeeze the dough together. All right, the next step is to brush water around the outer edge. That's going to help seal up the dough and the filling. Okay, I've put water around all of the edges, and I am bringing half of the dough over. You want to try to make sure that you get all the air out. So I'm pushing it a little bit around the mushrooms to squeeze out the air. And this dough is stretchy enough that you're going to be able to stretch it over the pile of mushrooms. Do one side of the edge. Now next, I have a little pastry cutter here, and it will also crimp the edges a little bit. It just makes it look a little nicer. If you don't have one of these tools, I'll show you that you could use a fork. So you have your choice there. Next, what I will be doing is I will be putting them in a container until I'm ready to cook them. And I'm lining it with parchment paper so that they don't stick together. And I may just dust the tops of these with a little bit of flour until we cook. If they start sticking to your board, add a little bit of flour, pick them up before you crimp them, and you can squeeze your edges shut if you need to. That one's coming open, so I'm just squeezing it shut. The mushrooms already smell delicious in this. I want to show you, as I'm getting ready to crimp them, if need be, I squeeze the dough together again to make sure that I'm able to get a nice crimp on there. That one, I just needed to push it together a little bit. And this was the folded edge, so I'm letting that alone. So I have some of them layered. I keep my dough that I cut off on the side. I don't squeeze it all together. And at this point, you just repeat the steps that we did to roll out the dough, fill them, and form ravioli. Ravioli are finished. You could store them in the refrigerator if you're not cooking them immediately. You can even freeze them. If you freeze them though, cook them while they're frozen. While I'm bringing my water up to a boil, I am going to saute these mushrooms that I'm using as a garnish. Also, season the mushrooms. I'm just using salt and pepper. Mushrooms are finished, and I'm going to move them over to a plate for garnishing later. In the meanwhile, I'm also serving asparagus with this, so I will steam the asparagus now. I turned the temperature of the water up a little bit. I want it a tiny bit hotter, and I move these around to make sure they're not sticking on the bottom. They are finishing up. Turn them over and let them cook on the other side a minute or so, just to be sure everything's cooked through. Okay, it's time to pull these out, and I'm just gently lifting them out of the water. Next, I'm adding about a tablespoon of vegan butter. I may end up adding more, not sure yet. And I want to coat the ravioli with butter. I am not serving these with red sauce. Yep, I'm going to add a little bit more vegan margarine. And I'm also putting that asparagus on the side there. You might be wondering what I'm doing with those nubbies that we had left over. I'm going to cook them and serve them in soup. So you can do the same, or you can re-roll them or throw them out. Now for the finishing touches. I'm salting it a little bit on the top with smoked salt, and I'll sprinkle a little bit of dried parsley on it, and then let's just garnish it with those mushrooms that we had put aside. We'll tuck one in there and one on top. So there you have it, this delicious, beautiful dish to serve your friends and family. On a side note, this is what the noodles look like that I cooked up. They will taste great in a broth. I wanted you to see what they look like inside. And of course, I'm going to do a taste test for you. The dough is tender, it's easy to chew, it's just so flavorful. And the mushroom filling, I think you're going to like it. So please subscribe and come back and see us next week.